At my brother's wedding reception, my father stood up to give a toast. He raised his glass and said, "To my son, who carries the family name, the family business, and everything I built." Then he looked right at me and added, "And to my daughter, who we're all very proud of, for finally finding a husband to take care of her." The room laughed. My husband laughed too. He thought it was a joke. I sat there with a champagne flute in my hand and a smile I had practiced since I was 9 years old. The kind of smile that says, "I'm fine, it's funny, I'm not hurt." The kind of smile that costs you something every single time you put it on. That was 3 years before everything changed. Before the reading of my mother's estate. Before the attorney said my name first. I should tell you about our family before I tell you what happened, because none of it makes sense without context. My father, I'll call him what he always called himself in interviews, is a self-made man. He grew up in Dayton, Ohio, youngest of 5, worked construction through his 20s, and somewhere along the way built Callaway Property Management into a mid-sized firm that handles commercial leasing across 4 states. He is proud of this. He should be. It took real work. What he is less proud of, or perhaps less aware of, is that the original down payment on the first property, a neglected office building in Centerville, came from my mother's inheritance. $42,000 her own father had left her. She handed it to my father the same week they got married in 1987 and never mentioned it again in any way that sounded like a demand. That was my mother. She gave things quietly and without keeping score, or so everyone assumed. Her name was June. June Ann Callaway, née Brewer. She was a middle school art teacher for 26 years. She drove a practical car and made her own Christmas cards and remembered every single person's birthday in our extended family without writing it down. She died of pancreatic cancer 14 months before my brother's wedding. She was 61 years old. She was the person I called on Sunday mornings and the person who knew, without my ever saying it directly, that I was being left out. My brother's name is Kevin. He's 38 now. Kevin joined the company at 22, straight out of Ohio State, and my father treated it like a coronation. I remember the dinner they had to celebrate, the steakhouse downtown, the bottle of scotch my father ordered specially. Kevin gave a little speech about carrying on the legacy. My father cried, actually cried, which I had seen exactly twice in my life before that moment. I was 26 at the time. I had just finished my 2nd year of law school. Nobody ordered scotch for that. I'm not saying this to sound bitter. I'm saying it because if you're going to understand what happened at the estate reading, you need to understand what the 17 years before it looked like. The pattern isn't dramatic. It never is. It's just 100 small moments that accumulate until they have weight. Kevin's name on the company letterhead before he closed his first deal. Kevin at the head of the table at Thanksgiving when my father sat beside him like a second in command. Kevin's opinion sought on where to invest, what to expand, whether to hire. Kevin's wife asked for her pot roast recipe. Me asked at the same dinner whether I was still doing the law thing. I passed the bar on my first attempt. Kevin failed his real estate licensing exam twice. I have never said that out loud before. I'm saying it now because I spent 17 years not saying things like that. Not because they weren't true, but because I was afraid of being the difficult one. The chip on her shoulder one. You know the type, my father once said. Not about me specifically, but in a way that felt specifically aimed. Women who can't just be grateful for what they have. I was grateful. I built a real career. I became a contract attorney at a firm in Columbus, made partner at 34, and bought my own house in the Short North neighborhood with my own money. I have a daughter named Ren who is 7 now and reads chapter books and has my mother's eyes. My husband, a high school history teacher named Paul, is a genuinely good man who did not fully understand for a long time why family holidays left me quieter than usual on the drive home. He understands now. My mother was sick for 11 months before she died. She did not make a lot of noise about it. That was also her way. What I didn't know during those 11 months, what none of us knew, was that she was also meeting with an attorney. Not the family attorney, the one who had handled my parents' joint estate planning for decades. A different one. A woman named Harriet O.C., whose firm is in Dublin, Ohio, about 20 minutes from where my parents lived. I know Harriet now. She's steady and precise, and she has the kind of calm that makes you feel like whatever is happening is manageable. I think my mother chose her specifically because she wanted someone who could hold the room when things got complicated. My mother always thought about rooms. She was a teacher. She knew how to read one. I didn't find out about Harriet until the day of the estate reading. When my mother died, the family assumed things would proceed the way they'd always been implied to proceed. My father had made comments over the years in the casual way that people make comments when they don't think they need to explain themselves. Kevin would take over the business eventually. The house would stay in the family. The assets would be distributed in the way that made sense, which, it was understood, meant in the way that reflected the company's future, which meant in the way that centered Kevin. My name came up in these conversations the way it always came up. A clause, a consideration. And of course Renata will be taken care of. As though being taken care of was the ceiling of what I could expect. The estate reading was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in April, 6 weeks after my mother's death. It was held at Harriet's office in Dublin. I drove up alone. Paul had offered to come, but I told him I was fine, and at that point I genuinely believed I was. I thought I knew what was in the will. I thought I was going to sit in an office, hear my mother's assets divided in the way I'd always braced for, and drive home. Kevin arrived with his wife. My father arrived in the same car as Kevin. I noticed that. They walked in together. My father shook hands with Harriet in the way men shake hands when they expect to be in charge of the room. We sat down. Harriet's assistant brought water. Harriet opened the folder. She said, "Before I read the document, I want to explain how Mrs. Calloway structured this, because the structure is somewhat unusual and I want to make sure everyone has full context." My father nodded. He was already settled into his chair the way he settled into chairs, leaned back slightly, one hand on the armrest, ready to receive. Harriet said, "June Calloway came to me 18 months before her death. At that time she had already been diagnosed. She was clear-minded and deliberate, and she had given this considerable thought." Harriet looked up. "The foundation of this estate plan involves an asset that was not jointly held. A trust established in June's name alone, funded primarily by her father's inheritance and subsequent appreciation, which was maintained separately from the marital estate throughout the duration of the marriage." My father shifted in his chair. "Over the course of 35 years, Harriet continued, June made a series of quiet investments from that trust. Index funds, primarily, some real estate holdings in her own name. She was conservative and consistent. The trust, at the time of her death, is valued at approximately $840,000. The room was silent. Kevin looked at my father. My father was looking at Harriet. "This trust," Harriet said, "passes entirely outside of probate, and its beneficiary designation was updated 14 months before Mrs. Calloway's death." She paused. "The sole beneficiary is her daughter, Renata." I don't remember making any sound. I might have. I remember the feeling before I understood the number. This wave of something that wasn't triumph exactly. It was closer to grief. Because the first thing I thought was, she knew. She had known for years. She'd watched the same 100 small moments I'd watched, and instead of saying anything, she had quietly, steadily built something for me. The same way she graded papers at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night. The same way she remembered every birthday without writing it down. Quietly and without making a scene, and over a very long time. Kevin said, "I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?" Harriet repeated it. My father said, "That can't be right." Harriet said, "I can assure you it is." "She would have told me," my father said. His voice had a particular quality I had never heard in it before. Not anger yet. Something underneath anger. We had joint estate planning. We had a family attorney. The trust was established independently, Harriet said. It was not subject to joint planning. June was entitled to maintain separate assets throughout the marriage. She did so legally and consistently. For 35 years, Kevin said. His voice had a different quality. Flat. Yes. My father looked at me then. I don't know what he was looking for. Maybe he thought I had known. Maybe he thought I was somehow responsible. I looked back at him with the same practiced expression I'd been wearing at family dinners for 20 years. The one that says, I'm fine. It's fine. I'm not keeping score. Except this time I didn't have to work very hard to keep it steady, because I was also crying a little. And the crying was not about the money. It was about her. It was about the fact that she had seen me. She had seen me the whole time, and she had done something about it in the only way available to her, quietly and without confrontation, the way she did everything. I excused myself to the restroom. I ran cold water over my wrists the way she had taught me to do when I was small and overwhelmed. I looked at myself in the mirror. I thought, I have my mother's eyes. Ren has my mother's eyes. 3 generations of women who learned to be steady when steadiness cost them something. I went back into the room. Kevin did not speak to me for 4 months after that Tuesday. My father called me 2 days later. He was calm in a way that took effort, I could tell. He said he hoped I understood that this would have implications for the family business planning. He said he hoped I would think carefully about what my mother would have wanted, which I recognized as a maneuver, the kind I'd watched him use in business dealings, the gentle repositioning of someone else's wishes as an argument for what he wanted. He said he thought it would mean a lot if I considered contributing some portion back into the family estate. I listened to all of it. When he was finished, I said, Dad, I love you. I'm not doing that. He was quiet for a moment. I said, she left it to me. I think she knew what she wanted. He said, she wasn't thinking clearly at the end. That was the moment. I had spent my entire adult life waiting to see what he would say when he no longer had the upper hand, when the story stopped going the way he'd written it in his head. Now I knew. He would question her mind. He would rewrite her as confused, as mistaken, as a woman who hadn't understood what she was doing. My mother, who had taught 207th graders the difference between a primary and secondary source and could spot a logical fallacy from across a parking lot. She was thinking clearly for 35 years, I said. That's how long it took. If you want to have a different conversation, I'm here. But I'm not going to agree that she didn't know her own mind. He hung up. There are things I want to say about what happened after, because I think sometimes these stories end too cleanly and the real ending is messier and more human than that. Kevin called me in August. 4 months, as I said. He didn't apologize exactly. He's not built for direct apology. That's just the truth. But he asked if we could have lunch, and I said yes, because he's my brother and because I'm not interested in a permanent war, only in not pretending anymore. We had sandwiches at a diner near his office. He said, I didn't know about the money either. I believed him. He said, I think I've been a jerk. I said, yeah, sometimes. He laughed, which surprised me. We're not close. We might get there. I don't know. My father and I are in the careful stage. He came to Ren's birthday in October. He sat next to Paul and they talked about Ohio State football, which is the language my father uses when he doesn't have another language available. He looked at me across the backyard once. I was pushing Ren on the swing, and she was shrieking the way 7-year-olds shriek when they want to go higher. And his face did something I hadn't seen it do in a long time, something that might have been regret. I didn't say anything. Some things don't need to be named to be real. The money is sitting in a managed account. I've used some of it to pay off the last of my law school loans, which I'd been chipping away at for 11 years. I've set aside a portion for Ren's education. The rest I'm leaving to grow. My mother's investment instincts were conservative and consistent, and I see no reason to change what worked. Harriet sent me a note about a month after the reading, handwritten, which surprised me. She said my mother had been one of the most deliberate clients she'd had in 30 years of practice. She said June had told her in their last meeting that she wasn't trying to punish anyone. She was trying to make sure her daughter knew she had been seen. I've read that note more times than I can count. I keep it in the drawer of my bedside table, next to the last birthday card my mother sent me, the one she mailed 3 weeks before she died, which arrived the day of her funeral because she timed it wrong where the post office had, or maybe she timed it exactly right. I'll never know. The card has a painting on the front, one of those soft watercolors she loved. Inside, in her handwriting, it says, "You have always been exactly enough. Don't let anyone teach you otherwise." I didn't, Mom. I'm trying not to. Some nights I sit at my own kitchen table after Ren is asleep and Paul has gone to bed, and I think about the version of this story where I stayed quiet my whole life, where I kept a practiced smile on and never pushed back and let my father rewrite my mother's final act as a misunderstanding. I think about how easy it would have been, how much smaller I would have had to make myself to fit inside it. I think about my mother at her kitchen table, 35 years of Tuesday nights, making quiet decisions in a world that wasn't asking for her opinion. She wasn't quiet because she had nothing to say. She was quiet because she was building something. I understand that now. I think I always did. I just didn't know until that Tuesday morning in April that she had been building it for me. I used to think the hardest thing about being underestimated is the moment it happens. The toast, the laugh, the room full of people who decide without asking what you're worth. But I was wrong. The hardest thing isn't the moment. It's the years after, when you start to wonder if they were right. That's what prolonged dismissal does to a person. It doesn't break you all at once. It does it slowly, in increments, the way water wears down stone. A comment at Thanksgiving, a business dinner you weren't invited to, a father who cried at his son's first day at the company and forgot to mention that his daughter passed the bar. None of it is a single wound, it's a pattern. And patterns are harder to name than wounds. What my mother understood, and what took me years to fully see, is that integrity isn't just about what you do when people are watching, it's about what you do when no one is. June sat at her kitchen table for 35 years and made quiet decisions. She didn't argue. She didn't demand recognition. She didn't wait for the room to change its mind about her. She built something real in the margins with what she had, and she aimed it at the one person she knew the room had gotten wrong. That's the part I keep coming back to. She didn't do it out of bitterness. Harriet told me that directly. My mother had been clear about it. She wasn't trying to punish anyone. She was trying to make sure I knew I had been seen. Those are two completely different things, and the difference matters more than I can explain. There's a kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make speeches or demand credit. It watches, it calculates, it waits, and then, when the time is right and the room is finally quiet, it speaks. My mother had that kind of intelligence. I spent my whole life thinking she was simply gentle. I was only half right. She was gentle and she was precise, and those two things together turned out to be more powerful than anything my father built in 30 years of making noise. What I want to say, if this story means anything beyond our family, is this. The work you do in private has consequences. The choices you make when no one is applauding, when there's no audience and no immediate reward, those choices accumulate. They become something. My mother proved that with 35 years of index funds and one very deliberate appointment with an attorney in Dublin, Ohio. Kevin and I had lunch in August. He said he thought he'd been a jerk. I said, yeah, sometimes. We're working on it. My father came to Ren's birthday and looked at me across the backyard with something in his face I hadn't seen before. I didn't name it out loud. Some reckonings don't need a witness to be real. I think about the version of myself who stayed quiet forever, who kept the practiced smile and let other people write the story. She would have been easier to be around. She also would have been half gone. My mother left me money. More than that, she left me proof that she had been paying attention the whole time, that she had looked at the room clearly, decided it was wrong, and done something about it. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I'm trying to do the same, for Ren, mostly. I want her to see a mother who doesn't make herself small to keep the peace. I want her to learn, before the world gets the chance to teach her otherwise, that being steady and being silent are not the same thing. My mother knew that. She knew it her whole life. She just found a way to make sure I'd know it too, even after she was gone.